we'll start out by looking at the first few psukim in Parshas Vayera, and what this is really, I guess, on the outside, what this is all about is we see the four languages of Geula, of redemption, and we'll see the Netziv really sort of weave his way through those languages, tying it into the progression of the Makos, talking about the Dalet Kosos, really sort of weaving a lot of different things together. So hopefully we'll be able to sort of stay with it and sort of put it all together. And the Netziv does this on his Perush to Shemos and really sort of covers a lot of territory just within a few psukim, really sort of jumps around a little bit. So we'll try to do what we can to stay with him and see where this leads us. So just starting out looking at the psukim to sort of refresh ourselves, what it says at the beginning of Parshas Vayera. So this is really just at the start of the whole process of the Makos. And it says, Va'era el Avraham el Yitzchak el Yaakov be'kel shakai u'shmi Hashem lo nadati lahem v'gam hakimosius brisi itam lases lahem es eretz Canaan. All right, I'm just going to skip a little bit. And then he says, Lachein, Emor livnei Yisrael. So this is Hashem talking to Moshe Rabbeinu saying, Emor livnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem, v'hotzesi ezcha mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim. So this is the first language, first word of redemption, that I would take them out from underneath the burden, the suffering of what they're going through in Mitzrayim. And I will save them from that avdus, from that slavery. V'ga'alti eschem, number 3, and I will redeem them bizra netuya uvishvatim gedolim. And then the fourth one, v'lakachti eschem li la'am v'hayisilachem le'lokim, and I'll take them out to be their God. Right? Okay, then. Vidatem ki ani Hashem Elokechem, and this is going to be a crucial word in here, vidatem, and you'll know, right, that I am Hashem your God, hamotzi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim, and then there's a fifth one that many bring in, vehivesi eschem el haaretz asher nasasi es yadi lasesos el Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, and I'll bring you, meaning that after Yitzis Mitzrayim, right, the end goal is to bring them into Eretz Yisrael. So that's the fifth language, but as we're going to see, the Netziv doesn't really get into Vehevesi, and that's sort of an interesting nuance. So let's take a look at the Haimek Davar. So he's going from the top, from Vehotsesu, the first of the languages, and he says, Bir arba lashonos shel geula sheyadua shekavu chazal negdam arba kosos shel yayin. So he doesn't actually quote it here, but it's I think it's Yerushalmi, the Yerushalmi in Pesachim, that says specifically, why do we have 4 cups of wine? And it connects the 4 cups of wine to the 4 languages that we just saw of Geula. V'yesh lahasbir inin dalet lashonos, and he says there's a lot here, right, to try and sort of understand what's going on. V'gam halo yafe hakasha. Mordechai. It brings down there's a kasha from the Mordechai in Pesachim, Perek Arba Pesachim, Lama ze kavu arba kosos shoyayin. So why specifically, this is the Mordechai's question, why specifically do we have 4 cups of wine? V'lo arba mine lechem or basar v'chadoma. Why not different types of, maybe it's matzah, I'm not sure what he means by that, or basar, right, different types of meats that we could have. Why specifically wine? If you want to designate 4 different items in the Seder, what's the significance? So the Netziv really seems to try to understand what's going on, what are these 4 languages, what do they mean, and why specifically wine? V'nei Tanya be'arbe psochim, Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Tamar Rabbanan Kos Chamishi Omer Alav Halo Hagadol. And I was going to ask another question, which is, so the Gemara in Pesachim says that the 5th cup, we say on it Halo Hagadol, meaning that's where we start saying Hala and Halo Hagadol, all the Kilelem Chastos. Okay, meaning that that's where we would fill, I think, the 5th cup, right? V'huva nusach zu berif v'rambam shulchan aruch. And this is all brought, by the poskim, by the Rif, the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, shemitzvah lasos kos he ve'eno li'ikuva. And it's an interesting language that they bring, that there's a mitzvah to fill the fifth kos, but it's not makiv, meaning that if you don't do it, it's not like you have to go back and do something over again. V'hu pela milmanav shach. So he says, either way we look at it, this is really just difficult to understand. Oki tzarech lihios chova. Either you should make it a requirement. It's a chiyuv. You have to do it. O lo yavo klal, or don't even bring it at all. What's going on? Aval ha'inyan. So he says, no, really, let's try to understand what's going on, what it means that it's a mitzvah, but not a chova. De muskal pashut hu she'efshar litzayer shehei ish hamoni shehu ke'evet kanani omed ba'avodas chomer ulevenim v'ol b'meshech muat l'malas Yisrael roi lamo b'maimed har Sinai l'kabel Torah b'mora gadol shol gilu shechina. So he says we have to understand a lot of what's going on here is if you take a step back and we see that Bnei Yisrael are going literally from being slaves that haven't received the Torah, don't know anything about the Torah, and we're going to take them from slavery. And he doesn't bring in the idea of, the memtes, shari, tuma, but I think it's sort of that idea, right? That we're taking people who are really sort of, people of the earth, who've been slaves now for a long time, and somehow in a very short amount of time, you're going to rise them up, bring them up, and bring them all the way to Har Sinai, to where they are, sort of kiviyachol, face to face with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He said that's not something that's not normal, right? That's not an easy progression for anybody. So he says, "V'alke nidrash la'alos dato v'tzamo shel adam la'at la'at," and therefore we have to understand, that the way that a person can expand himself has to be slowly. It has to be a slow process. V'kach chaya b'Yisrael hayu migushamim b'tzur ubedas v'nisalu b'meshech muat ad shegir lahar Sinai. And we have to understand how that worked, specifically with Bnei Yisrael going from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai, right, in 7 weeks or so. V'hainu dala l'shoner shel geula. That, he says, is the four languages of geula. And what's really interesting about the Netziv, and I think I've seen others who say this, but he really develops it, is that the four languages of geula is a progression. It's not just four different aspects or, four equal ways of saying something or something like that. He makes it into a whole progression. And he says, Metchila, v'hotzesiescha mitachas sivlas Mitzrayim. The first step is v'hotzesi, mitachas sivlas Mitzrayim, shehu esek chomer ubelevenim, sheyatzu mizeh mishar shehigiu lamakas arov. And what he says is that the first step of the process was taking away the real difficult physical labor of building bricks and building, and using those bricks to build the buildings that they built, taking them out of that. That's the first step. And he says that when did that happen? That happened at Makas Arov, right? So I think that's right. That's the fourth of the Makos, and that already happened. And we're going to see how he explains that. So he says, Kamushim Yavor Lahalan Ches Chav Ches. So let's jump down real quick. I think I have that here. So a little bit later in the parsha says, Vayachbeit Paro es libo gam bapam hazos v'lo shilach ha'am. So this is after the Arov. And at first Paro says, okay, this is terrible. I'm going to let you go. And then he, sort of gets his courage back, right? And he says, no, and he does not send the nation. So the Netziv over there says, Gam b'pam hazos, even on this time as well, he hardens his heart. He gets courage. Afagav shelo hayakan makom lahako lisos gam b'makos she'avoro. Even though over here, the Netziv is saying, what do you mean gam b'pam hazos? Even on this, this time around. So the Netziv explains that, beforehand, you might say by the Dhamma, by Tzvardeya, he saw that his own sorcerers were able to duplicate what was going on, right? What Moshe was able to do. He had the room to serve, he had some wiggle room to rationalize and to say, this is not from Kadosh Baruch Hu, this is not, this is just magic, or, Moshe Rabbeinu is just pulling a trick, something like that. But he could rationalize it. Shari al ken ksiv sham v'lo shama aleim u'kamosha kosav sham. As it says over there, he didn't listen to them. He didn't have any ability to say that, because here you have wild animals coming out of nowhere and inhabiting his land, and certainly his sorcerers weren't able to do that. He is able to, though. So what did he do? So the Netziv says what he did was he realized there's something going on. He couldn't completely distance himself away from the Makos altogether. So he says, you know what? Maybe I'm not treating these people normally, nicely. And he eased their burden. He took away having to build the bricks and having to do the building. He didn't send the nation lamdenu kihisko paro shehu nanashavuram. He realized that he is being punished. His arov is coming because of the way he's treating them, the people. But he felt like, you know what, I'm not going to let them go. But I've already made their lives a little bit easier. That should be enough. Daf Yud Aleph, the Shibud HaKosha Sar Yisrael B'Chodesh Tishrei. And he quotes, and Netziv quotes a Gemara. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that the Shibud of being in Mitzrayim started to go away, like it was pulled away from them in Chodesh Tishrei. B'Yafav Gav Da'amakos is Chila ben Nisan, Kidid Na B'Maseches Edios, and he's connecting a couple of different Gemaras. He's saying, well, we understand that in Nisan, right, a year before Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's when the Makos started. We know that from the Gemara Edios. So this is Mishpat Mitzrayim Yud Beis Chodesh, that it was a 12-month process. So it must have started back in Nisan. But Hainu min Nisan ad Nisan aval kushi shibud sar memakas ha'arav shahaya betishrei. He says this was Arav, and Arav was in Tishrei, citing that Gemara Rosh Hashanah, that in Tishrei that's when the Sivlus ended. The Kain Kasev Harava b'Mikra Yudches b'Matz. So he says, he quotes Ibn Ezra as well. Misad Tzvar v'Hu Meduyik, and he says that. So we won't see the Ibn Ezra inside, but the Ibn Ezra says basically that we don't know exactly how long each of the Makos lasted. For instance, we know that Choshech was 3 days. Some of them we know, like the early ones, lasted a week, like Dam and Sfardeya. So, but each one was a little bit unique, so we don't know exactly. So we have to sort of use our own intellect to sort of figure out what was going on. That's what the Ibn Ezra says. And so the Netziv is connecting back to what he said up above, which we just saw, that this is connecting back to V'hotzeias Eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim mishum hachi nita nasiman ditzach b'fnei atzmo uve'adash b'fnei atzmo ki me'adash nishtana ha'inyan v'od ayin lahalan. And another idea that he's bringing in here is, why do we have, so it's Rabbi Yehuda, right, who gives the simanim of ditzach adash be'achav. What's the significance of this breaking up the Makos into three? Then Netziv is giving us at least one idea here, that ditzach was still those three first Makos. Nothing had really changed. It was only at the beginning of Adash, the ayin, the arov, now you don't have sivlus anymore. That's been taken away from them, and that happened in Tishrei. Okay, so that's what the Netziv is telling us here. Again, we're now really connecting a lot of different ideas, but we're getting some ideas of the significance of Rabbi Yehuda, significance of it's a 12-month period, getting a little bit more background on what's really going on according to the Netziv. So let's jump back up to where we were before. So he said, so he fills in the gaps of mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim. We just saw that. But he says they're still slaves, and they're not doing the hard labor that they were doing before, but they're still under Paro's dominion. That is true until Makas Barad. Sha'az hacha lahokir es Yisrael k'mar shevur lahalan tes lamotei. So further on in Perek Tes, we're going to see what happens at Barad, where Paro starts to treat Bnei Yisrael a little bit differently. He treats them with a little bit more what's the right way of
Leniency.
what's that?
Leniency.
Leniency, maybe, but lahokir, I think that, like yakar, like he's treating them as if they're more special. So let's see what that is. So let's jump down. So Shemos tes lamadalad lamad hey vayar paro ki chadal hamatar v'habarad v'hakolos v'yosef lachto. So Paro saw that everything ended, and he again, starts to be a chote, right? V'yachbid libo hu v'avadav, and he gets his own courage back again. V'yechazak leiv Paro v'lo shilach as b'nei Yisrael. That's going to be the key words according to the Netziv. It says lo shilach as b'nei Yisrael, not v'lo shilach as ha'am. So let's go in the Netziv. It says mikan ve'ilach siv b'nei Yisrael v'lo as ha'am. L'lamdenu shemiaz hacha lahokir as Yisrael v'heser mehem kol ha'avoda. So the manual, difficult labor had already been pulled away from them, but now going forward, he's actually treating them with a little bit more respect, a little bit more, as if they have more value, and the entire avoda is being pulled away from them at makas barad. That's now we're at vihitzalti, because now the avoda is being lifted from them. Behind the Messiah Khan biyad Moshe. The mashma ha'arab ba'arab zachim k'moshe kosavti b'kama makomas dichsiv biyad Moshe v'chein kan hayu shinuyim b'volos ha'makos api ha'simen ditzach adash be'achav. Right, so now he's again connecting it back. So now we're in the last set where be'achav with barad shahaya al hamata asher biyad Moshe. The b'shlosha rishonim lo heser asirlos gam kein u'makas arov hacha lahaser asirlos k'mosho kosavti la'el u'makas barad heser ha'avdus legamri rak shelo ratza l'shalcham el his nagi bahem bekavod. Paro's still not ready to release them, but now he's treating them with more honor. He says this is also going to happen in the Gula in the future. But what we see from the Netziv is, again, these groupings and how Be'achav is now starting a whole, a new sort of chapter for Bnei Israel, that now we are no longer avodim at all at this stage in the game. Okay. So that's the second lashon of bihitzalti. So, okay. V'alzek si bihitzalti eschame avodasam. Hare nisalu od tzalmam v'datem l'shevach. He's, sort of, he himself, Paro himself, is sort of, raising them up, and treating them with a little bit more dignity and honor. V'dayin hayutachas misharis hamalucha. However, they're still under his malucha. It's not like they can just come and go as they please. They can't go out to the midbar and, as Moshe has requested on several occasions, right? V'das hamelech aleim. Ubemakas bechoros sagiru lamalas b'nei chorim al zeksiv v'ga'alti. So once we get to makas bechoros, then that's the next stage of v'ga'alti. Achar kach la'osam HaKadosh Baruch Hu lamala v'lakachri eschem li la'am v'kavu l'zichron arba kosos. Okay, so just to pause, so V'ga'alti will be by Makas Bacharos, and then from there we'll go V'lakachri Aschem Lila'am, where he takes us as a nation, and that's probably going to be at Har Sinai. We'll see that in a moment in the next Nesiv. He says, V'kavu l'zikaron arba kosas, b'asher she'ein davar maicho mashka, mishodato arpana, v'dato sho adam kamosh tiyas yayin. So now he's going back up to the question of the Mordechai. Why wine? Okay, so where are we? We understand that the four kosos are keneged, or because of the four lashonos of Geula. Okay, and now we understand that the four languages of Geula are actually a progression. Okay, get that, and so we want to make a zikaron in the seder for that. So we have the 4 cups of wine, but why wine? Right? That was the Mordechai's question. Why wine? Why not 4 nice cuts of meat or something else? So he says to that. He says the wine is something that's unique, that it is mesamech leiv u'mitiv geya, that it sort of it can make you happy, but it can also sort of increase your confidence, and that's part of what the whole process was of us in the four stages of Geula that the Netziv outlines. Now that's going to give us a good preface for getting to Kos Chamishi. What is this fifth kos that he said above? It's a mitzvah. It's not a chiyuv. Why is that? Why is it? What's the nature of the fifth cup? But now we've answered at least the questions of the progression. Why wine? Wine has this unique aspect of it that sort of helps us, I guess, really get into that idea of what it was like to be Bnei Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim. So we're going to go on to the next Nitziv. And here what he's quoting is, what he's going off of is Bezra Netuya Vishvatim Gedolim. Let's just look back up at the Psukim where we see that. Here we go. So it's at the end where he says, so this is where he says he'll redeem us with this outstretched hand in Shvatim Gedolim, which usually is referring to the judgments against the Egyptian gods. That's usually what Shvatim Gedolim is translated as. Okay, so let's see what the Netziv there we go. So he says, Yesh levar hashnuyim hanoflim b'mikraos bezeh. So now we're going to go into a bit of a tangent, but again, it's amazing how he's just sort of interconnecting so many different ideas. So he says, Pam ksiv biyad chazaka lachud, upam ksiv biyad chazaka uvizra netuya. If you've ever sort of paid attention to how the psukim work out, it is interesting. After I saw this, I hadn't really thought about it before, but after I saw this the first time, I started looking at the psukim, and sure enough, in some psukim, when it talks about Yitzis Mitzrayim, it says Biyad Chazakah, and no, it does not say Ubizra Netuya. Sometimes it says both Biyad Chazakah, Ubizra Netuya. Why is that? So he says V'kan Ksib Bizra Netuya, V'lo Biyad Chazakah. It only says Zra Netuya, not Yad Chazakah. Says V'lo Davar Reiku Chalila. And he says Chalila, don't think that this is something that's random, right? It's not random. Sorry about that. Okay. Midchila yesh lahakdim loshon brisa demechota parsha b'shalach. Our pasuk v'yarsha Hashem es Yisrael miad Mitzrayim ke'adam. So there's the mechota says over there in that pasuk v'yarsha Hashem es Yisrael miad Mitzrayim says ke'adam shehu ochez es hatzipor she'im ratza miyad hu chonka. He's holding a bird in his hand. And if he wants at any moment, he could easily strangle it. And it's like a person who is not exactly sure what the mushroom is, but somehow sort of preventing the vlad, the fetus, from being born to the cow, to the mother. Just like it says, how is it Akash Baruch Hu was able to take a nation out from, within another nation? Besides the fact that he says that Mitzrayim was a very powerful kingdom at that time, there's two other things that were sort of getting in the way of Yetzias Mitzrayim. He says, one of the problems was that you have all of Bnei Yisrael in one place. It gives Paro the opportunity that if once he sees HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sort of closing in on him, he can sort of do away with us in one moment very easily, because we're all together, we're all in one area. Ukvar Amru Chazal Bepsachim Tzidkas Pirzono B'Yisrael Tzedaka Aseh Kodesh Baruch Hu Shepizrono V'Chulei. The Gemara in Pesachim seems to imply that spreading out, like the diaspora, is a bit of a bracha to us, in that you can't destroy all of Bnei Yisrael because we're all not in the same place, right? We're all dispersed. Aval lo kein haya b'Mitzrayim, but that wasn't the case in Mitzrayim. Shahayu akol b'makom echad. V'hainu mashal hatzibur biad adam, and that is the mashal the tzibur in the hand of a person, that he can strangle at any moment. That he can strangle it. V'im yavo chaveru hachazak mimenu. So if somebody comes along who's stronger than him, v'yakehu pam v'shtayim sheyanichenu miyado, that he sort of hits him a couple of times to try and get this person to release the bird. Mahu osa kesharo she'en yachol lamod negdo. What does he do when he realizes he cannot stand up to the stronger person? He'll strangle the bird just to upset, just to make mad the person who's fighting him. And all the strength in the world of the second person isn't going to be able to save the bird. That's what Bnei Yisrael were very worried about. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to save us. And the strength of the makos isn't what sort of prevented this. So we have to see what really did happen. Kasher hainu miyasim lemaka es ochez atzibur. Shebeshashahu makeru lo yihya hakosav behefsek bintayim shehe bezek kedei lisarshev malasus lahachis. The way the makos worked out, HaKadosh Baruch Hu really never gave Paro enough time, enough respite to be able to think about, well, what do I do about Bnei Yisrael? He was literally going from one emergency, one crisis to the next. That's in his Netuya, he was giving him problems time after time, until he would put down the bird alive. And he didn't give Paro any time to think about doing anything else except releasing it. Because at each Makkah, he was giving Paro all kinds of problems and not giving him any respite. And he quotes the medrash there that says that when he says that Hashem says Anochi Nogef, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving Mitzrayim this constant, plagues or problems. That's what he meant, is that he might take out one of Paro's advisors. He might do other things to sort of make Paro constantly having to react to more crises. And all of that was to not give Paro any moments to try and think about what they could be doing to Bnei Yisrael. So that's Bin Nizra Netuya, this outstretched arm that just kept hitting and hitting and hitting. V'darash Magid Zuhacheref, and when we go through the Arami Ovid Avi paragraph in all of the drashos, one of the drashos is that we say Netuya Zuhacheref, right? That was pestilence, the plague of pestilence. And he says, Perish Misa Shahaya Bain Maka Lamaka. What that means is that between each Maka, there was pestilence, there was death, there were other things going on. So that's the first thing, the first idea of what was preventing, what was difficult for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to pull us out of Mitzrayim. Shenis, She'eno Moel, and it's already 1:00, but we'll just keep plowing through if you've got the time. I think that's so amazing, and so we'll just keep going through it. Shinis she'ena moel chozek hamakos lahotzi esemauna miyad ma'anav. However, there's another problem. What can you do? Or strength by itself, the strength of the makos is not going to be helpful in pulling out the person who's being terrorized or who's suffering from the people who are making that person suffer, unless the person who is suffering wants to and is screaming out and wants to get out. Mashen kein imhu eno rotze ma moeha chosaf shohamana. But if they're not interested in leaving, what does it help if you give makos to those who are giving the suffering out? That was a problem in Mitzrayim. We had several people who refused to go out of Mitzrayim. Some of them had high positions. Maybe they were wealthy, maybe they were ministers to Paro. Or they simply didn't want to enter into being an Eved to Hashem. V'tarasan is in the Torah of Amikom Makom Hotziam Hashem b'misas dever. Either way, nevertheless, they, Hakadosh Baruch Hu found a solution. B'misas dever shahaya al harishayim sheb'Yisrael b'shas makas achoshech. That there was also a dever that we said before. There was also a dever in makas choshech where certain Jews died. According to some Meforshim, unfortunately, it was a lot of Jews, but certainly there were those who didn't want to leave, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu had to take care of them before he could pull Bnei Israel out. That's the other mashal of the uber, the fetus that is being prevented from getting out or doesn't want to come out. So the uber, if the fetus doesn't want to come out, that's a problem in itself. But nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulls us out against our will. That is Yad Chazakah, of pulling out Bnei Israel against at least some people's will. That he says Yad Chazakah has an implication of being Bal Korchach, of being against your will. As he quotes pasuk in Yechezkel, Im lo biyad chazaka emloch aleichem, and meforsha magid zu hadever shahaya al Yisrael v'hevi raya melashon yad kamo dechsev hinei yad Hashem hoya. Okay, again, that's in the Arami Ovid Avi section. So me'ata move on shinoi hamikros dekan efshar lomer biyad chazaka shaharya bechira haya biyadem sheyirtzu kulam letzes. Okay, so now we have at least a better idea, though, of what Yad Chazakah and Ezra Nituya is. Again, it's really interesting, giving us the implications, and now we could probably go back to those psukim and sort of see what's applicable and why it only says Yad Chazakah and Ezra Nituya or both. Okay, and here we'll finish. So the last part of the languages that we saw up above is, it says Vidatim, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes us out, he says, and I'll take you v'lakachti, and he says Vidatim ki ani Hashem, and you'll know that I am God. And it says Hu havtachas acheras. This is a different promise altogether. Lashon chamishi shamala. This is the fifth lashon. So again, interesting. He doesn't go off of the hevesu that others do. He goes off of Vidatim. So he says kol kach talu b'das. What is vidatim? That means a really lofty level of having some really special connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This takes a lot longer to progress to this from the previous madregos. So this only starts at Matan Torah, where we build that relationship, and it goes weiter from there, further into the future. Because this isn't applicable to everyone. We can't have an entire nation where everybody is this connected and this sort of focused on Torah and Das Elokim and understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The idea is that you have, several or perhaps many leaders or Torah scholars, whatever you want to call them, that are sort of at this lofty level. Bereish Sefer Vayikra Biarnu Alpi Marda Al Elet Anshe Malek Siv Adam Echad Be'elef Matzasi. That that 1 out of 1,000 is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu found. It's 1 in 1,000. Haynu shebiyarnu idnin daled kosos shinishtarnu kol Yisrael b'tzurasam u'bedatam mekshar hayu. And this is really the idea of the four cups, that we are progressing and we are growing and we're becoming something more than we were prior, right, at the prior level. Bedaled madregos avo yesh od kos chamishi, but there is a fifth level. Neged zeh lashon shov yidatem v'asher ein chova, but there's no chiyuv to become this. L'chol Yisrael, not for everybody. L'hagil lezeh madrega. Al kein zeh hakos hu mitzvah v'lo chova. That's why it's a mitzvah, because we have to have some people who will do it. We have to acknowledge that it is a lofty level, but it's not shaykh. It's not going to be available or applicable to everyone. Therefore, it's not a chiyuv.